The Coupes class in GTA Online, or Coupes class if you're from America, is one that's been fraught with difficulties since the game's release in 2013. From having half the cars in the class being 4 doors rather than 2, to containing the utterly woeful F620, it didn't exactly get started on the right foot. Interestingly, when it released, the Coupes class was the 10th largest in the game, with 12 cars. The largest, Sports, only had 19 cars. Compared to the 7 supercars at the time, and the 15 to 20 that I personally think should be the maximum before new classes are needed so as not to be overwhelming, 12 Coupes were plenty. It was always the closest class too. While the Zion has always been the top pick for racing, the very last placed cars in the class were never too far away. Certainly from top to bottom, the Coupes class was, and still is, the closest in terms of performance. However, it wasn't long before the Coupes class was forgotten, and it's gone from being the 10th largest class in the game in 2013 to the 8th smallest as we near the end of 2020. There are now 14 classes larger than Coupes, but that in and of itself wouldn't be too much of a problem if the class had received a decent amount of new cars over the years, even if it was less than others. Unfortunately though, that didn't happen. While the Supercars class has gone from 7 cars in 2013 to 48 now, the Coupes class has gone from 12 to 14. In 7 years, the Coupes class has received 2 DLC vehicles, and with those vehicles being the Windsor and Windsor Drop, which is just a drop top version of the original Windsor, you could argue that really it's just one new car and one variation, like a Nero and a Nero Custom. Only 3 classes out of 22 total have received less DLC additions than Coupes. The Windsor was added to the game on 10th of June 2015, while the Windsor Drop came on 7th of June 2016. Since then, no new cars have been added to the class, and it's not as if there haven't been plenty of options. The first major case of this was the Alpha, which was the first car added to the Sport class alongside the Jester back in March 2014. A car that would have been a perfect fit for the Coupes class based on styling and performance, the Alpha was instead bungled into the Sport class where it was immediately off the pace. And that trend would continue, and still does to this day, with the Supers, Sports, Muscle and Sports Classics classes receiving a wide variety of DLC cars that could easily have gone elsewhere. The Sports class now has 74 cars with a wide variety of performance and styling cues that would have made many of them perfect in other classes. It's also true that some supercars and even muscle cars would have been better in Sports, but I could go on about class misallocations in this game for hours. It's the Coupes class though that has been on the raw end of this for a long time now. While other classes might get cars that should have gone elsewhere, the Coupes class is the only one that should have had cars that instead went somewhere else. And that leaves us with a class that looks almost identical to how it was 7 years ago. On screen now is a list showing the date each class last received a DLC vehicle addition. What's blatantly obvious from this is that even in the last DLC, the Los Santos Summer Special, almost every mainline raceable class in the game got a new vehicle except Coupes. Even more obscure classes like Service and Commercial have had DLC vehicles added more recently, and only the Industrial class, which has only ever received 1 DLC vehicle, the Guardian, has had a longer period of time without a new vehicle than Coupes. And as we look at a table showing the number of DLC cars added to the game since 2013 to each class, the lack of love for Coupes, even in comparison to aforementioned obscure classes like Service and Commercial, is stark. And when we take out the more obscure classes and look solely at the main raceable classes, it looks even worse, with Coupes right at the bottom. Even the Vans class has had almost 5 times as many DLC vehicles as Coupes. But why? Have Rockstar really forgotten about the Coupes class? Do they even remember that it exists? In a game where there are so many cars that would have been better elsewhere, and now such a high number of cars total that more classes are badly needed because a 70 strong sports class is quite frankly ridiculous, it seems quite peculiar that there is a single class that seemed to have been completely forgotten about and neglected for such a long period of time. Just as I was saying back in 2014, I was to be waiting for the day when the Alpha, and now many other cars alongside it, take their rightful place in a class that had so much more potential. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.